Hi, I'm Carrie Boynton.
And I'm Mike Sibley. We're the leaders of the James Moore Manufacturing Services team. Today on Moore Manufacturing, we're happy to have Curtis McCallister here. Curtis is the manager of our Technology Solutions Consulting Division at James Moore & Company. And we invited Curtis on to talk to us today about a very important topic of data protection, information systems protection, network security. With all the craziness going on in the world today, you just hear constant news reports of hacking and problems happening around IT systems, data loss. So this is a very, very relevant and important topic. And on top of things like pipelines being hacked, we have employees who are working remotely, not only because of the pandemic, but even prior to the pandemic, we had sales teams working remotely. And now, of course, we're approaching hurricane season, and as we get into hurricane season, there's always concerns about the big one coming through and what happens if. So let's start there. So Curtis, welcome to our show today. Thanks for joining us, and let's just start off with the hurricane side of things. With it coming upon us, how do I make sure my data is protected, my systems are there? How can I make sure I can get access? I know I'm asking you probably a lot of questions all rolled up into one, but really the key thing is I need my systems and I need my data. What do I do to make sure that I'm protecting that?
Mike, that's a great question. So when we're talking about a disaster like a cyber attack, or we're talking about something like a hurricane, which is very real to the Daytona Beach crowd and all of Florida, in fact, what we need is a system that will let you run independently of your building. And when I say that, in the manufacturing environment, we can't move our equipment out of the building, but we can move the other information technology, the things that keeps the business running. We can move the sales, we can move the marketing, we can move the payroll out of the building. So we can either do that by implementing a complete hosted solution where everything is just kept in the cloud. Therefore, it's not subject to any disaster in one geographic region. Or what's more common and frankly more affordable is we keep your systems mostly on premise and in your building, but we replicate it to the cloud with a nice solid business continuity solution. That way, day in and day out, you're working like you always do in your building efficiently. And when the disaster comes, when the bad thing happens, regardless what it is, we move everything with a few clicks of a button to the cloud. Everybody just starts connecting to the cloud, and business can at least continue on in some fashion.
Well, so one of the nightmare scenarios I hear, I bring this up because I've seen it happen before. You've got these backups, and the backup doesn't work because nobody's actually tried to use it. And so is there a process for making sure your backups work and testing it every once in a while? I mean, what do you recommend there?
Oh, there's absolutely a process, and what the industry as a whole has determined is you should test your backups at least once a month. And what that means is if it's a business continuity solution, you turn it on so you can look at the servers themselves. If it's a traditional backup solution, you restore data from it and make sure the data that you restore is readable and accessible. Something that we like to do is, we do that naturally every month, but we also check the backup logs every single day, and we make sure that the backups think that they're working. And to go a step further, when you look at those logs, you're not just looking for yes or no, but you're looking for yes, it worked, and it took the same amount of time last night to back up as it did the night before, and it backed up about the same amount of data within 5 or 6% as it did the night before. Because there's nothing worse than a backup system that tells you it's working, but something happened and you're missing half your data. In the years of experience, I've seen that numerous times. So it's very important to look at those details of every backup job. If you can't do it daily because you're a small operation, then at least look at those reports once a week.
Well, and I would think if we are, with a hurricane, things like tornadoes and storms that can be damaging can just pop up in an afternoon and be a terrible event. But a hurricane, you've generally got a week of notice or longer. So at that point, if nothing else, but I think it sounds like you're saying, regardless of hurricane, other things can happen. You need to be looking at it periodically.
Right. Yeah. There are so many things. I mean, it doesn't have to be a disaster such as a hurricane or even a cyber attack like what just happened to the pipeline. You could have a server failure. You could have a sprinkler malfunction. You could have a building fire. Any of these things can cause your business, if you're not prepared, serious financial burden. So yeah, all through the year, it needs to be just a regular process to always check your backups. And again, at least once a month, test them and make sure they're doing what they're supposed to be doing. Otherwise, you're going to find yourself in a position where you don't have the safety net that you thought you had. And it's been proven that 3/4 of the businesses that don't have solid backups after a catastrophe will likely go out of business within 5 years because the cost to rebuild the data is so expensive. Some data like sales orders and such, you just cannot replace. So when they're gone, and you lose that opportunity.
That's a great point. So along those lines of you mentioned sprinkler systems, and of course in a hurricane you could have water intrusion, flooding, things of that nature. So what about our server? What about that equipment that's susceptible? So oftentimes it's on a floor, on a rack that's relatively low lying. Is there any suggestions around that area?
Yeah, if you know that your equipment, whether it's standard information technology equipment like your servers and your workstations, or if it's your operational technology equipment, CNC machines, if you know they're in a lower area that's subject to flooding, you can build barriers with sandbags to help direct the water flow. There's pumps. What we often do to our more susceptible clients is we will take and cover critical equipment with plastic just before a storm hits. Now, that doesn't help you in the event of a sprinkler system,
Right.
and those we just kind of have to deal with when they happen. But if you see the storm coming, you can definitely put in some water barriers, some ways to guide the water the way you want it to go away from your really expensive equipment, and cover equipment with plastic. When you do that, you have to turn them off to make sure they don't overheat, but that's better than the alternative.
That makes a lot of sense. In terms of hacking and ransomware, we're always hearing really scary news stories, big companies getting hacked. How do you prevent those attacks on your system, even as a small to mid-sized company?
So it's the beauty of the cybersecurity landscape is whether you're a small company or a big company, you want to follow a lot of the same processes. First and foremost, you actually want to educate your people of what to look for. There are often telltale signs like a phishing email that you can train your users fairly efficiently on how to identify and what to do when they see it. So you train the users, you build processes and policies in place, so they know what to do when they see them, and they know what to look for, and then you add technology on top of that. After you train the users, make sure you have a good solid firewall in place with advanced threat management, things like geolocation filtering. A lot of attacks that we're seeing in the U.S., like the pipeline that we just saw, that attack came from Russia. Well, with a proper firewall, we can simply stop all traffic coming from Russia right out the gate, so it never has an opportunity to get to us. The firewall can have its own antivirus systems separate from your workstations and servers, which gives another layer of security. We can also prevent malicious software from coming in by preventing access to other locations or inappropriate places. We can stop social media sites, gambling sites, any range of places that your employees really don't need to go to do their job, but are highly suspect as far as being able to provide attacks into your network. We can simply stop with a firewall. And then, of course, we have the antivirus softwares on your computers. And then we also implement policies in your system, things such as principle of least privilege. If you have a user that doesn't need access to a set of data, you don't give them access to the data. Along with that, when we're talking about manufacturing specifically, we want to separate out data sets. We want to move your OT stuff onto its own network segment away from your IT stuff. So if a user does get compromised and ransomware does get in, yeah, your main server is affected, but your production systems hopefully are not. And you want to do the same thing with your backups, So in a manufacturing environment, you may have three major network segments: one for your IT, which your servers and your workstations are on; one for your production equipment, your OT, your CNC routers and your building equipment is on; and then a completely separate one for your backups. That way they're all protected, and if a hacker gets into one, likely won't touch the other two before you find them.
So you mentioned, I guess you mentioned production. I guess does manufacturing equipment, I know manufacturing equipment can be, your CNC machines can be connected. Are those at risk too if they're connected to a network?
Oh, absolutely. Anything that has network connectivity is at risk. Common guidelines for that production equipment, don't put it on the internet. It generally doesn't need to be. Separate it from your main production. The users clicking on something or accepting an email they shouldn't is one of the easiest way an attacker can get into your network. When that happens, if you have your production equipment, your OT stuff on a separate network, that won't be compromised. Now, those pieces of equipment can talk to each other. They can have shared controlling computers, but as long as those are on their own network that doesn't have internet access, doesn't not everybody can access them or walk up to them, then they're going to be safer safer than your actual production network, than your IT stuff. So you really want to look at doing that.
We keep mentioning how much of a risk employees, opening fraudulent emails and clicking on links can be. I know here at James Moore and Company, we do periodic testing of our employees by sending out fake phishing emails. Do you find that that's the most efficient way to train employees on avoiding, clicking bad links and emails, or are there other, ways that you can train employees to make sure that they're not doing things that are going to put the company at risk?
Anytime you have a systematic approach to training, you're going to get better results. What's nice about the solutions like what James Moore is using is it is a very systematic approach. We provide online training that the users go through and take tests. Then we test the user's knowledge and familiarity by running sample phishing attacks against them, monitoring and logging who clicks on them, and if somebody continuously fails, we send them to remedial training. This is an ongoing process that makes it easy to catch the new employees that are just starting in, and helps keep existing employees kind of refreshed with the information, and allows us to add new trends that we're seeing in the cybersecurity landscape. So that's definitely the way to do it. If you don't want to do that, or you don't want to invest in that, then having any type of cybersecurity training program, once a quarter at a minimum, is better than not doing anything. And that's the biggest takeaway with that is do something rather than do nothing.
I thought it was a fantastic idea. I'm glad you brought that up, Kerry, about the test emails. Unfortunately, not everybody passed that test, and we have remedial training for for those. You get a notice that says you have to go on and re-go through our training. And what's really kind of cool, and it seems to me that email is one of the easiest ways to get a virus into your system. We have these phishing alert buttons that we've adopted that can send it to IT and say, hey, is this malicious? And it's amazing. It must be at least once a day, if not twice a day, I'm sending those off. And when you know it, there's somebody trying to get me to click on something to go somewhere. And my whole thing is, when I get an email from anywhere, if there's a link in it and I'm kind of expecting I should have been able to click that link, I'll go to the website, type in the website, and go there myself, as opposed to going through a link, just in case, because I'm always fearful that link is going to come up and somebody's going to be laughing at me and saying, haha, you're out of luck now, So that's kind of a scary thing.
That is scary. So if somebody does click a bad link, what's next? What should they do next at that point?
Well, that would depend a lot on the business's policies. But ideally, there's already a response plan in place. For James Moore, for example, if somebody clicks a link and say, hey, I shouldn't have clicked that, the first thing they do is contact our internal IT department and let them know I clicked this link. That way the IT department can get ahead of it. It may be nothing. It may be legitimate. But on the other hand, with a virus, it's a lot like a snake bite. Many people have heard that when it comes to like a rattlesnake bite, minutes matter. Same type of thing. The sooner IT can get in and start looking at the problem and either make sure that it was nothing, or if it was something bad, they can start mitigating it, the less damage to your overall environment they can do. So you always want to contact your IT and get them involved anytime you suspect something is odd. And sometimes it's not apparent. We all at some point has clicked an email and opened an attachment and it looks like nothing happened. Well, that nothing happening could be the virus launching in the background. Or it could be nothing. It could just be a glitch. The problem is we don't know until we start digging into it and start looking. So anytime you deal with that, you always have to contact IT. And Mike, you're absolutely right. The example you gave is exactly why we want to do the ongoing training. We want people to stop for a second and just pause and say, hey, is this legitimate? Could this be bad? Let me go to the website on myself and let me check for myself. If you get an email from Bank of America, even if they are your bank, most likely they're not going to email you. Just go to Bank of America yourself.
Right. Yep. Well, I think, Carrie, we always, from the IRS perspective, they're not going to generally send you, they're not going to send you an email. They're going to send you a letter, right? So that's something we always warn against as well.
Absolutely.
Just switching gears real quick here for a second. Now, what about employees working remotely? So it could be, we've had like I mentioned early on, we've had employees working remotely for years and decades. You got salespeople working out there. They may have their laptop. They might have any sort of, designs, technical designs, things like that. Now with the pandemic, we still have people working from home using their home-based network or internet and, logging in through some sort of VPN perhaps. Is there any suggestions there to continue this idea of security and make sure there's not a threat from that perspective?
Certainly. Mobile workforces, people working from home, definitely adds a whole new level of challenge to securing and protecting your business information. But there are some things that we can do that's not that challenging to do when you think about it. So one of the biggest ones for any remote workforce is establishing some form of multi-factor authentication tool. What that means is when you go to log in to your computer, when you go to log into your application, you not only punch in your password, but then it asks for something else. This could be a 6-digit PIN that gets texted to your cell phone. This could be a digital key fob that you have that the number changes every 60 seconds. Something to have a next step that's really difficult to break into and to hack into in the time frames given, so that if your password gets stolen or compromised, the bad guy still can't get in. Along with that, you also want to be very careful who you allow remote access to. Because of the pandemic, almost everybody's been given remote access. But as people start coming back into the office, we as business leaders need to think, hey, does this person still need the ability to remote in to do their job? If they don't, remove that ability. Other things that we can do is establish a zero trust policy. Well, okay, I know who this user is. I know they take care of things, but you know what? Let's not let them use their home computer. Let's issue them a computer that we have our business controls established on it, our antivirus, our security policies, our VPN connection, something that we can monitor. That way we can help manage and control the situation as much as possible to make sure that we can reduce that risk. Those are probably the biggest ones that we can look at.
Great.
So we talked a lot about security, but what about availability and making sure that our email or our website or any part of our cloud, it's all accessible and available to us when we need it?
That's actually a great question. Here's where things look a little bit different for us. Most of everything we spoke about already has been things in our building. Right there in your place of work. When we start talking about websites and email, these are two areas that I would actually suggest move them off site. Move your website to a well-established, mature hosting provider. Don't look at the develop your free website for low cost. Look at somebody that has been doing it for a while and talk to them and ask them, hey, if I put my website here, how are you protecting it? Are you backing it up for me? Are you patching the web servers on a regular basis? Do you have a service level agreement that promises you're going to guarantee me how many nines of uptime? Who's going to manage it? Who's going to manage the security on it? Ask them, what responsibilities do I have as the owner versus you as a hosting provider? And if their answers don't make sense or don't bring you comfort, look for somebody else. And obviously, if you're not sure whether they do or not, then you need to involve your IT in those conversations. Now, when it comes to email, a lot of the same thing still applies. Move your email to the cloud. We frankly prefer the Microsoft Office 365 solution because it's an enterprise class email system with all of its enterprise class protections and all the enterprise class capabilities for a fairly inexpensive cost. So we direct people there most of the time because it's easy to get into, and they do have SLAs and they do have protections in place. Now, they don't back up your data. So if you're moving in that direction, you need somebody to back up your data just to protect it. But that's really the way to go. Get those pieces outside of your building.
Well, Curtis, thanks. We're starting to wind down here with just a short amount of time left. But any idea, innovative technology, anything out there that you would say, hey, this is the first thing that comes to mind that everybody needs to be thinking about right now? Just top of your head. There's something out there that somebody could find really, really useful in their environment.
The two biggest things to be looking at, I've already mentioned one of them, multi-factor authentication. Super strong, but it's also not widely adopted. Definitely needs to be adopted very quickly. The next thing to look at, again, not a lot of businesses do, is adopting the zero trust policies, and it's as much as a mindset as anything else. If you look at zero trust as a whole, and you could Google that and read the synopsis of it, when you adopt that type of mindset and you implement those procedures inside your organization, you increase your safety level tenfold.
Great. Hey, Curtis, thank you so much this is just a super important topic. You just, in a short amount of time, you just gave so much information. We know data backups, very, very important, and make sure they work and are tested. We know email and training people on how to deal with emails is important. Multi-factor authentication, just a few tips that came across. So again, thank you so much for joining us, and for all of our listeners out there. There's a lot of complicated stuff. Curtis makes it sound really simple, but if you have any questions or concerns at any time, feel free to give us a call and talk to us a little bit more about that. Again, thank you all for listening to us, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.
To learn more about James Moore & Company's manufacturing services, go to JMCo.com. And don't forget to subscribe to our More on Manufacturing series to receive updates when new videos and podcasts are released. If you'd like to be a guest, or if there's a topic you'd like to see covered on a future episode, contact us on our website. You can also follow us on social media for more news as the landscape on manufacturing continues to rapidly evolve.